Hey guys, it's time to talk about Tesla, the internet's favorite car company to either love or hate. A lot of you out there have said that there isn't enough opinion here at Alex & Autos, so let's give this a whirl, and I'm going to talk about the top 10 things that Tesla does right and the top 10 things that I think Tesla could improve on. Regardless of what you think about Tesla, they are undeniably the benchmark in the EV landscape. Whether we're talking about this all-new Model Y here versus other compact EVs out there, or we're talking about the original Model S or Model X, everything ends up being compared to a Tesla because they're the ones with the biggest EV sales right now in the United States. They are one of the only companies that has run out of EV tax credits solely, of course, on EV sales. General Motors has also run out of EV tax credits, but that was due largely to the success of their plug-in hybrid. The result of this, right or wrong, is that absolutely everything ends up being compared against a Tesla. Whether we're talking about a Nissan Leaf, someone's going to compare it to a Model 3. If we're talking about a very expensive, high-performance, ultra-crazy EV out there, like a Porsche Taycan, it's going to get compared to, you guessed it, a Tesla. Or if we're talking about a discount compact crossover, or EV, whatever you want to call it, like a Kia Niro or a Hyundai Kona EV, obviously they're going to get compared against a Tesla as well. Obviously, the first thing Tesla needs to improve on really is fit and finish and build quality. This isn't going to be a surprise to anybody out there that has read a Tesla review, whether we're talking about the Model Y, the Model 3, or any of the Teslas that have gone before it. When it comes to attention to detail, the panel gaps are far from perfect on this Model Y, just as they were on the Model 3 that we bought some months ago back in late 2019. The seams just don't align quite right everywhere, and the paint quality, there are definitely some flaws. Now, this particular model is one that we rented on Turo, and this has had its paint completely fixed, and it's been completely wrapped as well, so it does have kind of a matte glow to it. I have to say, I do like this sort of matte white look that the clear bra all the way around the car gives us, but it doesn't hide some of the paint flaws that you can see, and doesn't hide some of the fit and finish flaws that we see around the front, around the doors, and of course on the inside as well. Number 2 has to be purchase experience. If you recall, I bought a Model 3. We bought the absolute base standard range model, and that purchase experience was honestly fantastic. I never had to go to a dealer, and that is my idea of the perfect shopping experience. If you want to buy a Model Y or a Model 3 or an S or an X or anything else, you just click online, you fill out all of your details, you upload your driver's license, your insurance documentation, etc. And then at some point later, they're going to arrange a deliver the vehicle, or you can go in and pick it up. The other thing you'll notice is that Tesla's documentation for sale is incredibly simple. If you've ever gone to the dealer and been presented with this enormously long form, you've probably thought to yourself, why is this thing so big? It must be government mandated somehow. Turns out it's absolutely not, and Tesla has very, very simple forms as well. So the entire purchase experience is absolutely excellent. Tesla also controls the entire experience period with the car for good or for bad, because there are no independent dealers, of course. If you want to get your Tesla serviced, it's all through Tesla. It's a one-stop shopping ecosystem for purchase, service, repair, etc. But that brings us on to problem number 2, one that I might call the cult of Tesla. Tesla has created this very insular network where they control everything. I always find it amusing that some folks out there will say, I don't want an iPhone, I want an Android phone because Apple controls everything on the iPhone, but I love my Tesla. Well, guess who controls everything to do with your Tesla? That is Tesla themselves. They control that service experience, etc. And that is especially important in states where you cannot get your Tesla easily serviced. There are some states out there where Tesla is not allowed to have that kind of facility, and so vehicles will actually have to get trucked out of the state to get serviced and then brought back to you if something goes wrong. The cult of Tesla is difficult to define because sometimes you're forced into the cult of Tesla. Just by owning or driving one, people may perceive you as some different kind of person than you really are. We'll just leave it at that. But there's also the fact that Elon and his personality permeates everything to do with these vehicles, and especially when it comes to the really rabid, shall we say, fans of Teslas. Because some of those folks will diss other technologies. They'll say, well, plug-in hybrids are stupid, we should all go full EV, regardless of the theoretical global benefits of using that same number of batteries in plug-in hybrids, or the dissing of technologies that end up on Tesla models in the future. For instance, heat pump systems. In our recent review of the Tesla Model 3, a lot of folks were giving me a hard time for saying that I really wished it had a heat pump. They were saying Tesla would never have a heat pump because they're just stupid, they're too complicated, they're too expensive, they don't give you the benefit in cold weather. Well, guess what we find on this Tesla Model Y. That's right, we find a heat pump for 2020, and that's something that we're probably going to see in other Teslas going forward because heat pumps are great. They just use less energy, and that's exactly why we find them in this and a number of other EVs and plug-in hybrids out there. That severely reduces your energy consumption in the winter. So while this model may not be as efficient in the summer as a Tesla Model 3, if you're out there driving in 30 or 40 degree weather, I suspect that the Model Y may actually be using less power overall than the Model 3 because it's not going to take as much power to keep the cabin as comfy. Number 3 is seat comfort. These seats are really very comfortable. If you sat in a very first generation Model S, then you'll notice that those seats were not terribly comfortable. But Tesla has seriously improved the overall seat design, and I rate these really up there with some Nissan seats. And that's not meant to be a dig at Tesla by any stretch. Nissan has some very comfortable seat designs as well. We have power seats for the driver and front passenger, 4-way adjustable lumbar support, which is definitely my preference. Elon giveth and Elon taketh away. The downside to Tesla's SUV lineup seems to be their overall relative practicality, whether we're talking about the X or the Y. And a lot of that has to do with this sort of egg-shaped or jelly bean-like profile. You'll notice that this is supposed to be an SUV or a crossover, but it does not really look like one. We have a roof height that is a little bit more similar to something like a BMW 3 Series or 5 Series GT, the short-lived liftback versions of the 3 Series and 5 Series. And that's basically what we have going on here. We have a rear hatch, which is definitely more horizontal than it is vertical, and a pretty plunging roofline. This looks sort of like someone inflated a Prius or any of those other ultra-efficient vehicles. And there's a reason for that. This shape is very efficient, and that's why we see it on the Prius. That's why we see it on Tesla's sedans, and of course, Tesla's crossovers as well. The downside to that is overall interior practicality. Obviously, you're not going to fit something as big and as boxy right back there in the rear, and we don't have as much interior volume as you might think for something this size. For some reason with the Tesla Model Y, Tesla is not giving us cargo figures behind the second row seats. They're only giving us cargo figures behind the front row seats because that number sounds impressive and it sounds large, and of course they're including the frunk in that number as well. But it's worth noting that even including the frunk, there are a number of mainstream crossovers out there that will give you more cargo space in a smaller footprint than the Model Y, just because they're going to be a little bit squarer there in the back. Clearly, number 4 has to be performance. The model that we're driving here is not the performance version of the Model Y, but it's definitely quick. 4.8 seconds 0 to 60 manufacturer quoted, and if you get the performance version of this, 3.5 seconds 0 to 60 is what they say it will do. I totally believe Tesla there because their models have been pretty quick in the past. To put that in perspective, 3.5 seconds 0 to 60 is faster than most folks out there will go 0 to 60, something like a Charger Hellcat or a Challenger Hellcat, because they have troubles applying that power. Now, something like a Jeep Grand Cherokee Trackhawk is going to be faster 0 to 60 down there at around 3.2 seconds because it is absolutely insane, but it's also going to cost you more than a Model Y. On the downside, sometimes Tesla really can take this disruptor thing a little bit too far, and we can see that in, for instance, their charge cable. This is one of the severe dislikes for me with pretty much every Tesla out there, except for the ones that are sold in Europe, of course, is that we have a non-standard charging connector. Now, is this charging connector slimmer, more elegant, more practical? Is it better than a J1772 connector? I don't dispute that. I think that this is indeed superior. I love the fact that you can AC and DC charge on this connector. I love the fact that it's a little bit smaller. I love the fact that they've been able to adapt it to higher power charging, up to 255 kilowatts. The problem is it's not the same connector as any other EV out there. So why on earth did we do it? The problem is that there is an adapter to use a J1772 connector on your vehicle like this Tesla Model Y, but why have an adapter when you could just have the same connector? And the fact of the matter is, although there are a lot of supercharging stations available in the US, there are more J1772 connectors out there than this connector right here because that's what the industry standard is. And as we see progression from other EVs out there on the market, like the Mustang Mach-E, upcoming full EVs from Ford, from GM, from everybody else, we are going to be seeing more and more and more of those J1772 connectors and more of the CCS combo charging connectors that are DC fast charge connectors. And we don't have either of those native on Tesla models. So standards. Why won't Tesla just give in and give us a J1772 connector on the car and make it more compatible with everything else out there? Some folks out there say that it's because Elon is altruistic and he wants to share everything and that's why he's released patents. The trouble is he hasn't actually released patents. He simply said, hey, if you use our patents, we promise, pretty please, that we won't sue you. They haven't actually released the patents, and that's why nobody else has taken them up on their offer for using these connectors. The other reason, of course, is that that would mean that they would have to have some sort of arrangement with Tesla to use their supercharging network or other Tesla connectors out there that are built, and they don't have that particular mechanism just yet. So instead, we have Teslas on an island using their own charging cables. That ties in, of course, with number 5, the charging network. I know you've heard a lot about supercharging, but here's the thing about supercharging. It's not about the number of connectors or the speed of the connectors, because honestly, there are more combo charging connectors supposedly in the United States right now than there are supercharging connectors. We expect that number to eclipse supercharging by a wide number over the next 5-10 years or so. It's also not about the speed of charging, because some of those new 800-volt systems out there will be able to charge faster on the same conductors than Teslas over here that are charging on the older 400-volt system. The supercharging innovation is about location. Tesla realized early on that people needed to go places. They wanted to go on road trips. They wanted to be able to commute from Los Angeles to San Francisco, etc. And perhaps this is because Tesla is located in the Bay Area, and that San Jose or Bay Area to Los Angeles trip is pretty common, but they designed and located their supercharging stations to facilitate that kind of travel. Meanwhile, the other car companies didn't want to have anything to do with charging infrastructure. They came at this from a different perspective. They said, well, I don't do gas stations. There's no Toyota gas station, no Ford gas station. Why should I care about charging stations? Tesla realized very early on that you needed to have a hand in charging, because otherwise no one would want to install a supercharging station in the middle of nowhere. The problem side of number 5 is, of course, related to number 4, and that is that as other networks grow, Tesla risks being left behind. We don't see Tesla putting too much into 800-volt systems right now, and it does seem that the rest of the car industry has latched onto 800 volts as part of the future, obviously with those CCS connectors, which may end up outnumbering the Tesla supercharging connectors. Now, it is worth noting here, of course, that at the moment, there are not very many of those 800-volt connectors, not very many of those systems that can charge as fast as the number of supercharging stations that will, but number of fast charge connectors still exceeds Tesla supercharging connectors. So though some of those may be going 50 or 60 kilowatts rather than 255, but there's still a little bit more available in urban areas. Number 6, Tesla gave us livable EVs. And by that I mean EVs that didn't look weird. They weren't strange, like for instance the BMW i3, but instead they were very practical. We have a big cargo area back here. We have comfortable seats. We have livable ranges, over 150 miles in every Tesla out there. And although there's a lot of focus put on 300-mile Teslas and the possibility of going 400 miles in something else, I think over 150 miles really is the essential livable range for the average American, because that means that you can easily commute several days without worrying about your battery level. You can use the air conditioning, you can use the heater in those adverse climates, and you can go on smaller day trips around the region without worrying about that charge. Obviously, 200 miles, 300 miles, those are lovely goals, but Tesla has proven that a lot of folks out there don't really need more than 150, and they've been able to give it to us in an attractive package, one that's not crazy. Unfortunately, Tesla continues to reject features that are becoming nearly standard throughout the automotive industry. For instance, we don't have Sirius XM satellite radio, no Apple CarPlay, no Android Auto interface either. Number 7 is design. Tesla has definitely gone for a clean and elegant look, whether we're talking about the outside or the inside. I have to admit that I'm partial to minimalist designs, and we certainly find one in the cabin of the Model 3 and Model Y. This is, of course, really just an overinflated Model 3 in terms of its overall design, so we find a very similar interior theme with a simple strip of wood running right there across the interior, Everything about it has an uncluttered and elegant feel to it. Although I have to admit that I do like the front-end design that we saw in the first Model S, rather than the revised design that we see in the rest of the Tesla family now. Unfortunately, likely due to Tesla's relative financial situation, we don't find the same level of features and options available in Teslas that we find in other luxury entries out there. So you won't find a stitched leather dashboard, or ventilated seats, or massaging seats, or really high-end leather options, etc. Fancy paint colors, custom paint colors, different interior colors, etc. You won't find a red leather interior inside your Tesla from the factory, for instance. I think this is a little bit of a pity, and I do wish that Tesla would spend a little bit more time on adding some extra features, because a lot of these features could really help improve their bottom line. For instance, one thing that's always struck me as a little odd is that we don't have a true competitor to BMW's M3 or AMG or RS lines from Audi. Instead, we have really fast 0 to 60 numbers and then pretty typical luxury car tires all the way around. Obviously, this is something that you could fix aftermarket, but I'd be really interested to see what Tesla could do if they had a factory performance package. And I'm not talking about the performance package that's available for the Model Y. I'm talking about something perhaps with fender flares, some actual sheet metal changes that enabled it to have really wide tires, throw caution to the wind, throw the range out the door, and embrace the 3.5-second 0 to 60 with some seriously crazy handling numbers. Perhaps we'll see that in the upcoming Plaid version of the Model S, but for the moment, we don't really have that same BMW M3, C-Class AMG, 5 Series AMG, M5, etc. We don't have that same level of performance and body uniqueness that we see in the German competition. Number 8 has to be fun to drive. Obviously, this is sort of like number 4, where I was talking about performance, but a little bit different, because I'm not just talking about acceleration, I'm talking about genuine fun to driveness. The steering is definitely quick in the Model 3 and Model Y. Some might say a little too quick. I think it can sometimes be considered a little bit twitchy, but it definitely has that go-kart-like feel that some folks like. This is an awful lot of fun out on the road. But the counterpoint to this, while we're going downhill, is that we don't have a technological innovation that we've found on Priuses for generations, and that is a blended braking system, and I still don't understand why. If you're driving your Tesla Model 3 or Model Y hard out on your favorite winding mountain road and then you step on the brakes, you are wasting energy. Because so far, no Tesla has a blended braking system, and by blended I mean a system that employs regen braking and friction braking to slow the vehicle down. All we get is lift-off regen. I lift my foot off the brake, this is all the regen braking we're ever going to get. If I stab the brake pedal, no more power is going into the battery beyond what the car was already doing when you lifted your foot off the gas pedal. And initially Tesla says that they were doing that because they didn't like the way blended brakes felt, because of course they felt like a Prius, and that really wasn't great. But I would argue that since that time, manufacturers like especially Porsche have proved that you can create a blended braking system that is effective and has feel like a conventional brake pedal. The Taycan will deliver significantly more power back into its battery than any modern Tesla because of that blended brake system. Number 9 is innovation, or thinking outside the box. That is something that Tesla clearly does well, and you can see that in their infotainment systems, especially in their interiors. We have a big 15-inch touchscreen right here. We still really don't have the equal of this in any other vehicle out there. Now, we have about the same kind of screen real estate in something like a Mercedes-Benz S-Class with their twin narrower dimension screen, but doesn't have quite the same kind of punch as one enormous screen in the dashboard. Tesla also has a massive number of people working on software compared with most other auto companies out there, so they're constantly tweaking the software of their infotainment system and the software of the vehicle in general. We don't see that same attention to tweaking in really any other vehicle out there, and Tesla decided early on that they really didn't want to do their own mapping interface, so they used a lot of Google mapping for the system, including Google Traffic, and I have to say that really is the way to go. The mapping interface is very, very well done. It's just very easy to use. Tesla also decided that their navigation systems needed to account for charging early on, and that has really been a key innovation that so far no one else has duplicated quite the same way. So you can see that it'll tell us we will get there with 6% battery. We won't have enough to get back. We would be at negative 23, so it would need to calculate a supercharging station for us on that return journey. Very, very handy feature. But sometimes you can think a little bit too far out of the box, and the box is a good place to be. For instance, I think that the level of button removal in here might have gotten just a little bit too far. I wouldn't have minded buttons for instance, the heated and ventilated seats perhaps. I wouldn't have minded a knob to adjust the windshield wipers rather than digging through the menus in here. A button to open and close the trunk and frunk that's closer to the door, that could have been handy as well, because sometimes you have to wait for the software to boot up so you can actually click the button right on this screen to or open the trunk or open the frunk. And if the car has been asleep for a while, sometimes it's not quite as responsive. It is definitely snappier than anybody else's infotainment system out there, really. But if you just want to hop in the car and just stab a button to get the trunk or frunk, sometimes that doesn't happen. This is a bit of a pervasive theme with Tesla, so you like some of these things or you don't. I really like the idea of this large open moonroof, but in practice, I think it lets a little bit too much light and a little bit too much heat for me. I wish it had an LCD dimming function or a roller shade from the factory. And last, whatever you think about Tesla, it is undisputable that they have certainly moved the industry forward. Again, Tesla has redefined what an electric vehicle is. They used to be ugly little boxes that were totally impractical, had really tiny short ranges, were not terribly desirable. But Tesla proved that you could wrap an electric car in luxury clothing and sell an awful lot of them. Coupled with that is drawback number 10, and that is not specific to Tesla at all, but really more of a universal EV drawback, and that is that electric vehicles are still honestly not for everybody out there. Ranges are still more limited than we see in gasoline vehicles or some hydrogen vehicles out there. For instance, even though there are EVs that will get you up to about 370 miles of range, you can definitely go over 400 miles of range in something like a Hyundai Nexo if you treat it very gently, and we're expecting over 400 miles of range in the upcoming Toyota Mirai. Aside from that, there is the reality of charging. Now, some EV fans dispute this and they live perfectly happy in apartments or condos or places that don't have a charging infrastructure, but I strongly recommend a home level 2 charger. And if that's not something that you are able to do at home, then you have to think whether an EV is really a good fit for you. Are you going to be okay with the occasional supercharging? Is your charging network available at community chargers or at your employer? Is it robust enough to keep you as charged as you want to be, as often as you want to be? And that's something that really is more of a personal decision. I have to say that for me, if I was living in an apartment, I don't think that I could handle an EV right now just due to the way that I drive, the things that I like to do, and the availability of charging around me. On the other hand, I live out here in the forest and I do have a charger at the office. I have owned EVs before and they're totally fine. They're easy to live with. You never have to go to the gas station, just charge it at home, charge it at work, and I never really stop for DC fast charging very often at all. But that doesn't mean that EVs are for everybody. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section below. And of course, stay tuned for our full review on this all new Tesla Model Y coming up very, very soon. I'll see all of you later.